Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and it's time for us to go over the defense versus the Vikings in that second preseason game from yesterday. That was Saturday. Had the pleasure of a day game, which is really nice for me and my guest tonight, who is my wife, Maureen. Maureen, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, you know, don't you? It seems like a hollow offer on your part to wonder how I'm doing, but I appreciate you, babe. Thanks for coming on. Day game is nice for us because we get to do our work a little bit earlier. A night game, particularly in the preseason, and during the regular season, is even worse because the games start later. We go till very late.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like to stay up past 11 o'clock. And on a night game, we're generally hitting the sack around 1 or 2 a.m.
All
So,
right, and then
yeah.
only to get up early to have sync schedules and get back right back to it. Obviously.
Yeah. And our
Uh,
dog doesn't understand that we're working. She she keeps the same schedule. So when the sun comes up, I still got to get up and walk her.
There you go. That's certainly true. All right. Well, another stifling performance by the defense. They got some gifts from the Vikings quarterbacks. Both McCarthy and Brosmer did them some favors. McCarthy with two misses right around the goal line, two easy passes. Rod Woodson really got him on him for missing the pass on the right sideline. I think that was Price. And then they went in the back left corner of the end zone to Ty Felton. Wallace did not have good coverage. He was wide open, and he missed that one high as well. So big gifts that kept out of the end zone from the 1 yard line there in the on their second possession, I think it was. All right, the defensive depth throughout the rest of the game flexed. The Ravens have a tremendous amount of defensive depth. It's really become the hallmark of this organization generally is the amount of organizational depth they have, and that's the thing they do right. To call it the Ravens way and then talk about it winning preseason games for them makes it seem like the Ravens way is some sort of cheap trick or not of tremendous value. But the truth of the matter, having organizational depth, of course, is tremendously valuable, whether it's on the practice squad or on the bottom of your 53 and whatnot, because that depth will be tested during a typical season. But a
So
byproduct.
I was just going to ask, do you think that seems like this year we're focusing more on a better defense where I felt like Harbaugh was ultra focused on the offense with Lamar? Do you find that Jesse Minter, like this is his influence, or do you think it's due to something else?
They do have tremendous defensive depth this year. I think they just got a good crop of draft picks and UDFA's, and I think they did a good job signing those. The bottom of the roster on defense is packed at corner on the defensive line. Not so much an inside linebacker, and they're lucky in the sense that the safeties, their top guys are all quite good, so they don't have to worry about having tons of depth. But they've got real depth at a lot of different positions. There's been some depth I think uncovered in yesterday's game at outside linebacker that we're going to talk about. It's I'm not sure that I would call it a Minter influence specifically. I'm sure Minter wouldn't want the Bateman situation to be what it is right now. I'm sure Harbaugh wouldn't want it either, but it is what it is. They have to deal with it. And now they might or might not need a sixth receiver on this team. So, and in terms of their offensive line depth, I'm sure they're not completely thrilled with where they are on the offensive line. And we just scored some offensive line players today looking at the offense, but they'll work with what they have and do the best they can. And they certainly have gone a long way with that by going out and signing Dwayne Ledford and bringing in his coaching acumen to this team. All right, they never trailed in this game. Never really in doubt. I'd say right as we were watching the game was never really in doubt. After they scored their first touchdown, that is, in the second half, they dominated pretty dramatically and forced the two turnovers in the fourth quarter. But even then, the Vikings were down 10 points by then, I believe. Might have been down 10 points a little later in the fourth quarter. But by that point, there wasn't any question the Ravens were going to be able to seal off this victory. Um, do you ever feel stressed in this one?
No. I mean, not that it really mattered, but um, you know, I no, I it was pretty one-sided. Once they didn't make that first touchdown, and then they didn't get a safety on us, despite the fact that we were backed up, basically throwing from our own end zone. I think our punter saved us, and we were fine.
Great game from Eckley, who had a couple of punts that are right around 60 yards, one of 61 of 59, but he was definitely one of the standouts in this game. The pass rush, I thought, stood out. They had 5 sacks in this game. We're going to come back to that with a little bit more detail later. But Minter was facing Brian Flores, the Vikings coach, and Flores is very much a guy who's known for extreme blitz packages and pressure concepts. And he was the coach, in fact, who was in Miami during the 2021 game where the Ravens faced 40 cover 0 blitzes in the same game. And he, I think, pretty much threw the kitchen sink at the Ravens in that first half. Now, as we were just recording, a couple hours ago, the pass rush by play, it seemed like it got a lot simpler in the second half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they didn't blitz a lot or stunt.
Yeah. A lot of stunts in the first half, a lot of stunts early on. That was when Venga was in there. It was when Gwynn was in there, and Carson Vincent was in there pretty much the whole game. But they certainly did do a lot of different work. We'll get back to that a little bit later. We'll certainly talk about that on the offensive side. But the thing that I thought was interesting was it almost seemed like a lot of the things Minter did in this game, which I felt like were more than in the game against the Eagles in terms of schemed pressure and also in terms of numbers. They had a 6-man rush in this game. That it was maybe a reaction to Flores going after their quarterback. He was saying, okay, well, if you're going to rush the quarterback all out like you would in a regular season game or a playoff game, then we're going to do it too. And, the Ravens, we're getting the edge in the pressure war. And I think maybe Flores decided, okay, let's see if I can get him to dial it back, and I'll dial it back too. Yeah. Little bit of a laboratory game for Minter. And I'm not talking COVID vaccination laboratory. They're not trying to, this isn't the highest, most stressful thing. But the Ravens, one of their weaknesses has been not having outside linebackers who could drop to cover. And Minter seemed to work on that a fair amount in this game. They actually had 13 coverage drops in 96 total outside linebacker pass snaps played. So that means 48 on each side. And that's, 50 or 60% higher than normal. Not out of this world, but 50 or 60% higher than normal. Some of that may have been trying to throw different scheme at Flores and just show him, hey, look, I could do this if you really want to play this game. But I think some of it also is he's searching for outside linebackers who can drop to cover during the season that he can, work with and find some additional ways to be flexible in getting pressure. Because one of the keys about having a flexible pass rush is you can still rush 4 if you drop an outside linebacker and rush, say, the slot corner or safety and inside linebacker, any of those, and you can get a free runner while still rushing 4.
Do you think some of that is determining whether or not this is a player you're going to keep?
Some of that. So Ethan Burke, I think, and maybe Kamen Rucker and definitely Adisa Isaac are in a battle for that 5th outside linebacker spot. So I'm sure we'll come back to that and talk about that a little bit. But that's a real question as to whether one of those guys is sufficient as a coverage linebacker or whether they have to go outside the organization, because they don't really have a single guy on their roster right now, in my opinion, who is a good coverage outside linebacker. Nobody like Tyus Bowser or Matthew Judon was. And our standards are higher in Baltimore. They always had guys who did that, but they don't really have that guy this year. They tried Ethan Burke, for instance. They dropped him to cover 5 times in this game, made a really nice play punching the ball out on the forced fumble. He had 2 others. He didn't drop on the plays, but he made the 2 passes defensed, one on the screen pass, another when he got in the quarterback's face for pressure. I thought those were good, but I don't think he's the guy, honestly, to be a drop to cover defender.
And do you think we can only keep one of those 3?
Probably, because they would normally carry 5 outside linebackers. That's all they really have to to get to 25 defenders. I know there's people out there talking about the Ravens keeping a 26 defender this year. We've actually got some wagers in place. I think it'll be
I
25,
heard.
25, 3 yet again. Yeah. So Voss has money with me and Nick has money with me on that. So we'll have to keep those receipts.
Hmm.
All right. But I thought, since you're on tonight, let's talk a little bit about what our process is. And in particular, a lot of people have heard about our process during the regular season, but not too many people understand it, I think, during the preseason and how we do things differently. So let's talk about whether we're at a game or we're watching the game on TV. What do we keep track of during a normal play on offense or defense?
Yeah, so in the regular season, when we're at the game, and whether it's we're at the game for a home game or watching it on TV for an away game, we're keeping track of the secondary. So I mark down all the cornerbacks and safeties that are on the field. For preseason game, we actually keep track of all 11 players that are on the field. And that's because we're trying to determine what's the 53-man roster going to look like. So we need to know who's on the field, when are they on the field, and what did they do when they were on the field. So it's a lot more work for me.
Yeah. Well, so you do all 11 on both sides of the ball during the
Yeah.
preseason and during the regular season. I mean, of course, we keep track of all the 11 players on the field, but the other six on defense in particular are my responsibility, particularly for sitting at home on TV. They're my responsibility during the game. And if we're at the game, then I have to record them when we get home.
Yeah, that's true.
You acknowledge my effort on this. I
Yes,
just
I
I just want to make
acknowledge.
sure we're
Yeah,
on the
you
same
do some
page
work
here.
too.
Okay. Okay, good. I do say I really
But
appreciate the fact that you took on the secondary for all games. That's an enormous thing, and
yeah, and
it
the only reason why we do it live at the game is because a lot of times on TV, they're not, the cameraman is focused, ultra focused on the line and the quarterback, and they're off screen. They're, downfield, so they're not necessarily in every shot.
yeah. And worst thing in the world is when they're doing the old Ray Lewis Peyton Manning game, and they're like going from face to face of those two at the snap, and you don't even get the formation and things like that. I mean, that's just so annoying. I can't even say.
Yeah.
Then you have to wait for all 22, and you have to be able to get some value out of that initial uh, watch of the TV copy. So anyway, we like the TV copy for a lot of reasons, but one is we have the DVR control, so you can go back and forth on that, and you can hone in and you get the number read pretty easily. And sometimes from the distance of the all 22, you can't really get the number very easily, even after a little bit of time. So that can be a problem. Thank goodness we're fans of the Baltimore Ravens, by the way, and not the Miami Dolphins or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have some of the most unreadable jerseys imaginable. But I actually found the Vikings jerseys this week to be very, very difficult to read.
Hmm. Yeah, and the other thing that helps with the DVR is that you can, um, determine was the quarterback in the pocket for 3 seconds. Where
Yep.
if you're watching the game, say on Apple, you don't necessarily have that same information.
Right. So you can't use the DVR to go forward one frame at a time by doing the pause fast forward, which allows you to count in 0.03-second increments or 1/30th of a second increments. That's extremely valuable and a big part of our process. Okay. So let's go back to what you're recording. Now you record all the players and you have it actually by drive. You have everybody who started the drive and
Yep.
your replacements who came in on that drive, right?
Yep.
And so at the end of a game, you have a sheet that may have 10 drives on it or 12 drives on it, whatever it is. And you've got all the positions listed, all the players listed who played on those series. Then you can look down any particular column of that and see, hey, for example, and I'm looking at the cornerback column, we had Tampa and Kone start the game together. They played together for 3 series. And then on the fourth series, Longer Beam came in for Tampa, but still with Kone. And the fourth series, we're back to Kone and Tampa, and then back to Longer Beam and Tampa. And so they did a little bit of rotation in this game, but the point is you can tell when players retire for the evening, when they first start, and then when they leave the game. Now, why is that important?
Well, if it's someone that you think is going to make the team, you don't want them injured, so you're going to pull them in the second half. no reason to risk injury. If you've seen enough of a player one way or the other, you might also pull them to give somebody else a shot to see, you know, I think we saw one guy got pulled after he made a bad play.
Right. That's Silas Walters we're talking about when he gave up the 50-yard reception. So,
Yeah. But
it,
then he got
it,
another chance later.
yeah, and he had an interception. He also gave up another big play later too. But anyway, that
Yep.
was so anyway. The idea from this is that by order of entry, you can tell a lot. I know folks have seen this in my articles and heard me talk about this before. But order of entry is king in the preseason. It's the best, most direct way in which the coaches are telling you, here's my real depth chart. I don't care what we put out on a website or whatever, but this is the real depth chart we're using. And very rarely is there an exception to that. And one thing that was noticed, and I saw somebody say, is that Jacoby Lane was out in the second half, and meaning he was in street clothes for the second half, and he's encouraging Tez Walker, who's in uniform, in the second half. That does tell you something pretty important about the relative playing time of Lane and Walker that is likely this season. And I would have not said this until fairly recently. I still thought Walker and they'll both get a lot of snaps. Don't get me wrong, but Walker appears to now be behind Lane on the depth chart. And with the Bateman situation, that may even be more true. And that's a topic for the offense, but certainly they're not taking any chances with Lane at this point.
Right.
All right. So one of the things we get when we do this, put in watch every substitution and put in new players as they come, is that we're constantly checking to make sure our number of players adds up to 11, so any new players are entered. And that means anytime there's a change from a base or a standard nickel package, we pick up on it because there's the wrong number of each position on that, the quote unquote wrong number. So the first thing we do when we look at this
number.
is
not wrong.
The first thing we do is look for 3 defensive linemen. Once there's 3 defensive linemen, we're pretty sure it's the base package, but we've got to check around at the other positions, make sure, okay, you got 2 inside linebackers, 2 outside linebackers, and 4 in the secondary. And that, for every single snap this season, has worked out when we've seen 3 defensive linemen. Now, when there's 2 defensive linemen, you could technically have a dime in, for example. And we won't miss that because we'll notice that, hey, there's an inside linebacker missing in this thing. And then we did happen to catch one dime snap that happened in this second game, which I thought was kind of interesting because it's the first non-base or standard nickel of the entire preseason. If you want to look at it, it's Q2 828. And they brought Keandre Jackson up to cover really almost like a slot corner, the tight end Bartholomew, who split wide left. And they inserted on that same play Amane Oruwariye at safety. And that was just, I think the main reason for doing it has to be just to get a look at Jackson in the dime defense. I think that the plan would be, if anything happened to Hamilton, who I'm sure will be the dime under most circumstances, that they want to know, hey, can Jackson take on this role and be comfortable starting closer to the line of scrimmage?
And he had a good game, right?
Oh, he had a great game. Yeah. Another good one from Jackson. All right. It was an interesting game because they could have played more dime. They had 3 inside linebackers hurt. Carl Jones didn't dress at all. Jamon Johnson came in and he got hurt pushing a guy out of bounds on very early in his time on the field. He might have played about 10 snaps or so. And then Williford, I thought he was inactive for the game because we never saw him on defense, but it turns out he actually played the first snap on special teams, which probably means the opening kickoff, and he might have gotten hurt on that play. I don't have more information on that, but that meant the Ravens were down 3 inside linebackers from that. Then you take the fact that they're not playing any of Buchanan, Simpson, or Roquan, and that leaves them with only 3 other guys, actually only 2 other guys that were left after the initial injury, and that was Higgins and DeLuca. And so those guys effectively played very close to the entire game. I think Higgins played 60 snaps and DeLuca might have played 51. But the point was that Higgins also was coming off a concussion last week against the Eagles. I didn't even really expect him to play, but he did, and he lined up. And not only did he leave the game then fairly early at halftime or so, they put in Jamon Johnson. It was actually in the second quarter, I think the expectation was that Jamon Johnson and DeLuca were going to take him the rest of the way, but they had to reinsert Higgins after um, Johnson got hurt on this push out of bounds play. So, a long night for a long day for Higgins. Played well, and he's a big part of the Ravens' defense this year. I'd hate to see anything happen to him, but that's the position the Ravens were in. All right. Talked a little bit about the 14% drop rate from outside linebacker. Again, I think Minter just looking to find some guys who can cover. And it's interesting in that group, they did not drop Young, Zion Young, even once, but they dropped Rucker 3 times, Adisa Isaac 2 times, Burke 5 times, and who's the other one I'm forgetting here? Another guy that they dropped 3 times. I've said Rucker already. Green dropped 3 times. So this is a team really searching for options, because I think of all 5 of those guys effectively as rush outside linebackers and not guys who would play on the Sam side opposite the tight end, but they're really looking for options there.
So in terms of depth, is Green at the top of that list?
Yes, Green. Well, they have 2 guys who they did not dress for the game. Tavius Robinson now is at that point in his career where he's not dressing for preseason games. He's in his 4th season, and they also, of course, have Hendrickson, who is not dressing, and neither of those guys will play at all during the preseason. Green is very important, and we're watching the game, and you see my reaction to this thing. I'm concerned about Green every snap he's out there, because he's very important to the Ravens this year. And I thought terrific game yesterday, particularly in terms of getting really low, highly bendy. He makes plays from the ground as a pass rusher, which is very unusual and exciting, that he can almost crawl through the muck to make a play on the quarterback's shins, which I like to see. But he made an outside move to make. I think it was a quarterback hit, and then he made it inside. No, it was a sack. And then an inside move to draw a holding penalty and deliver a quarterback hit. So really nice. Great game from Green. I'm sorry, I thought you had something else here. Okay. They sat 14 defensive players in this game that were I would say for vet purposes. There were also a few injuries, but it's all the names Wiggins, Humphrey, Awuzia did not play. They did not play Hamilton, Hawkins, or Starks. They did not play at outside linebacker Hendrickson or Tavius Robinson. At inside linebacker, they didn't play Roquan, Trenton Simpson, Teddy Buchanan. And at defensive line, they didn't play Travis Jones, Nnamdi Madubuike, and Calais Campbell. Now, of course, Nnamdi Madubuike, while off PUP, has not even done any sled work yet. So he's not ready to play in the game. He won't play, I don't believe, obviously, at any point this preseason. And in fact, I'd say these 14 guys who sat out this time, not necessarily the injured guys, like Carl Jones and whatnot, they probably want to get him in a game. But the 14 guys who sat out because they're veterans, no way in hell will they play in the last game against Washington. So they'll play a little bit probably in the controlled environment, as Minter calls it, against the Commanders this week in the joint practice. But they won't play in the last preseason game. It's too much of a risk. So they've basically had those same guys sit out the entire preseason. All right. They had other guys sit out for injuries. Examples are like Randall, Ali, and Pinter on the offensive side. They still don't know what the decision is going to be on Pinter. So while a lot of people are assuming, and I think probably correctly, that he's lost for the season, they're still waiting for more medical surety of that situation. And then, of course, Bateman is out for legal/league disciplinary risk, or whatever you want to call it. And so we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Right now, Minter is extremely tight-lipped about that. His only comment is no comment. I think that's appropriate. The Ravens have said all the right things. We're cooperating with the league. We're aware of the situation, and we have no comment at this time. That's exactly what they should be doing. And hopefully this does not end up being a significant concern. All right. Let's talk a little bit about what we learned from this order of entry stuff as we go through it really quickly. And we've gone over some of this last week, so I don't feel the need to do it again. But there were changes, and there was a major difference in the way they rotated players. Now, I'm sure you noticed this, Maureen, on the sheet, is that you had players doing more, take a series off, then come back in for series than they had in the first week.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, they played the same safeties for 3/4 of the game last week. This week, it was doing a lot of rotating among three safeties for a lot of the game, and then they added a fourth safety who was Oruwariye, who was actually a corner going at safety later in the game. So it's just an example of the kind of thing, kind of difference they're doing from what I would call the kind of normal preseason rotation is A, all A snaps completed, then B, all B snaps completed, then C, um, uh, being the order of things. And that's still something they do in the offensive line, but they didn't do it as much in the in say places like the defensive backfield, at inside linebacker, at defensive line. They rotated the whole game, so there's no issue. That same thing at outside linebacker. So a lot of differences by position with that.
So they had three cornerbacks that didn't play at all: Wiggins, Humphrey, and Awuzie. And so you feel they're a lock to make the team?
Sure, all three of those guys are, and the rest of the guys are all fighting for jobs. So that's the way it should be in the
Well,
preseason.
how many additional corners do you think they'll keep? Three?
Four, I think.
Four?
I think four, but it is a question. Is it because if they keep four safeties, then they
Mm-hmm.
probably have room for seven cornerbacks, unless they want to keep four safeties, six cornerbacks, and say an extra defensive lineman to get to 25.
And when
Um,
you say seven, are you counting one on the practice squad, or are you
nope,
seven on the 53?
seven on the 53. And so some of those guys will not be active every week. You know,
Right.
one of the joys around this house is having to go to a game, but also watch the inactive list and how busy the 30 minutes before we actually head out to the ballpark is.
Yeah, so last year you were very annoyed with the defensive linemen that were inactive, some being healthy scratches, and you didn't think that we had enough, active for the game.
It's
Um,
it might I might as well be poked by a cattle prod every time that happens. I'd be the equivalent amount of annoyed to every time I see there's only four active defensive linemen.
yeah, I can
But
attest to that.
there's,
So,
there's
so seven cornerbacks. Is that an increase from prior years because we're facing more mobile quarterbacks?
I wouldn't draw the cause and effect conclusion, but it is an increase from most prior years. They would typically carry six cornerbacks. I don't think it's necessarily that it's more mobile quarterbacks. I think it's more of a passing league, and you want to make sure you have the proper amount of depth there. And of course, if they decide that they want to, quote unquote, slip someone through the practice squad, then a young player has to go through waivers, and then every other team in the NFL has a chance to claim him if they're willing to put him on the team right away. And if they don't, then you have a chance to re-sign that guy to the practice squad. But he also, at that point, may say, no, I got a better offer on Detroit's practice squad, and I think I'll be up sooner there. And I just believe them more than what you're telling me about, I'm going to have a chance here real soon in Baltimore. And you can lose players that way too. And they lost their seventh round draft pick, Garrett Dellinger, the offensive lineman. I think we ended up going to the Browns. He might have been released by the Browns shortly after that, but he went to the Browns because the Ravens, offered him a practice squad spot, and they wanted him, but he didn't want to take it. He thought there was a better offer there.
Mm-hmm. So how much of this do you think is the front office trying to make value in relation to their salary cap?
That's the entire job of the front office. What you just described is getting the GM's job entirely is to get the most value out of the cap dollars he's got. That's the constraint,
Mm-hmm.
and to get the most value they can out of the draft capital they have too. But I mean, I always say on this show, the most important thing that the general manager does is decide where not to spend, because everybody wants to spend and get the player that's the highest value player, regardless of price. And also, I find also often, and look, I know this is not true of all listeners. If you're here, you're probably here because you actually like some of my opinions on Friday Morning GM and other shows where I'm definitely, and Voss for that matter too, is often the voice of reason in terms of not overspending and not spending future cap dollars. But that is a general problem in the Twitterverse, that there's a lot of people, maybe a very vocal minority, but definitely a substantial quantity of actual people who want to see more spending done by the team for various reasons. But they
Are
don't
they
really.
specific about where they want to see spending?
I would say there's a those the fans who want a lot of spending want to spend money on top shelf pass rushers, top shelf receivers,
Mm. But I
and
feel like we've gotten really good value of later round draft picks and undrafted free agents. That to me seems like kind of the Ravens' bread and butter, if you will.
yes. Very well said. I mean, either the Ravens have consistently done exceptionally well, and if you look at the teams that have drafted the best over the time the Ravens have been in existence, it's the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Packers have been the dominant teams in terms of drafting. And guess what? They've also been the dominant teams on the field. You can add the Patriots to that, but those three teams really understand how to build organizational depth, and they've done a great job of it. So anyway, we're getting a little far afield from the cornerback situation. So let's go back to that. In this game, they started with Tampa and Kone on the outside. The second guy in was Longer Beam, and he folded in and actually had time with each of those guys. Then they brought in Robinson at the beginning of the second half to play corner. I like Robinson a lot. I'm a little surprised he might not be higher on the list, but Longer Beam played a great game last week. And so he and Longer Beam got to play together. Robinson and Kone are kind of the two guys, as I pointed out, who put together the size, youth, and length, speed, size, youth, and speed component in the five cornerbacks they have to choose from. Martin and Rivers are smaller. And Longer Beam is a little smaller as well. So those are the guys they have. And then they had at slot corner, we saw Martin light it up last week with one, about the best preseason game you'll ever see in terms of a guy having a sack. The only other tackle for loss on the team. He had 4 tackles. They were all defensive wins. Fantastic game for Martin last week. This year, Rivers came back with a big game, and he was all over our notes in terms of things he did. He had one player was in the hip pocket of the defender of the receiver, and he had to throw it away. Another where he knocked the ball away that was a drive-ending play. So actually, it wasn't a drive-ending play in his case. I think that was a 3rd and 1 that became a 4th and 1. But he had a big play in this game as well. And now it's a real battle right now whether Martin, Rivers, or both make this team.
Yeah, so Webb hardly played. It doesn't look like I don't think he was very effective when he was out there, but of the other 4 guys, well, there's 4, 5, 6 guys, and you're saying only 4 of them will make it.
Yeah, 4.
Yeah, so 2 of them are likely to be cut. Have you seen enough play for you to make a decision? Like
Okay, so
anyone that stands out for you?
I mean, I like them all, so I hope they figure out how to keep them. But Tampa, who played in the game, is a lock to make the team. He's the 4th cornerback on the team.
Yeah.
So they now have 3 more spots. It
And
looks
Cody,
like
I know you liked a lot last year, and he got injured and didn't play. Now he's back, and he looks pretty good, right?
he does. He looks pretty good. But Longer Beam and Robinson also look pretty good to me. And it'd be a shame. Longer Beam's played great for 2 games. Kone's played, he's played pretty well for 2 games. Robinson has been a preseason miracle worker pretty much for the Ravens. He's had 2 great years there. And then, Martin and Rivers, here's the unfortunate thing. They both play slot corner. And I don't see either of them being guys who can move to outside corner. And the Ravens have a lot of depth at outside corner. Sorry. They have at the slot corner position, they have Hamilton, who takes up most of the snaps, because that's about big nickel snaps are the bulk of snaps that a slot corner could be on. When Hamilton moves to dime in the dime package, then they have a slot corner position open, but only one of 3 players can have it. And one of them is Humphrey, who might move over, and that's what's happened in the past. Another is Martin, and another is Rivers. But either one of them, it's only about 25% of total snaps. So the total universe of playing time available to a slot corner on this team, a young slot corner who's slot corner only, is not very much. And so I think the Ravens may have to consider trading one of these guys if they, as the preseason comes to a close.
Would there be a position on special teams that either one of those guys could fill?
But either of them, whenever active, would certainly play special teams and be expected to be a pretty significant contributor on that. But if you're really talking about value on defense, which is where the differentiation is going to be made, then they have to. It's very hard to carry two of those guys when only one of them can play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, you want to move on to
Yeah,
safety?
let's move on to safety. So Jackson and Wallace started the game again. They played 3 quarters last game. In this game, they didn't. They played, they played the first series together. Then at the start of the second series, Silas Walters was on. I swear I thought this is going on. What's going on? Jackson isn't on the field. Is he hurt? What could be wrong? But it was just a different strategy that Minter had this game. He wanted to rotate through his guys and have them be on and off the field in different combinations and whatnot. Silas Walters was on, and to add insult to injury, that's when he gave up the 50-yard play to get the Vikings down on their major scoring opportunity of the day.
And he had tight coverage, right?
He had tight coverage, but he couldn't find the football in the air, so he got turned around and he couldn't make a play on the ball. So that was unfortunate. The second one, it does happen, but it happened a second time.
Not like he was trailing.
Oh, it's not like he was completely outrun down the field. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But the second time, he had the nice bracket coverage in the middle of the field on the 36-yard play. Jackson was behind. He was in front. He's got to really make the play on that ball, but he couldn't find the football, tripped trying to do so, and kind of wiped out somehow Jackson on the play as well, so that neither of them, despite incredibly tight bracket coverage, could make a play on the football on that 36-yard play. That was frustrating, to say the least. Mm-hmm. So he had 2 very bad plays, and then he came back and got the game-sealing interception, right? So he broke on the football.
Redeemed himself.
There you go. All right. So anyway, at safety,
how many safeties do you think we're going to keep?
4. And so the 3 of them are Hamilton, Hawkins, and Starks, who are being put in bubble wrap right now for opening day. And then Jackson will be the 4th, and his spot, I'd say, is 100% secure at this point. I think that they'll keep Wallace, if they can, on the practice squad. They have several veteran spots that they can use for that. I don't think there's another safety they like enough to put on the practice squad, but I guess if Wallace signs somewhere else, it could be Walters because he's the next guy up. They had Jacquez Robinson on the roster, but he was moved to IR this week. So unfortunately, that's a move that costs the team some cap dollars, which is unfortunate, but obviously cost Jacquez Robinson the season as well. So unless he's released on some sort of injury settlement, then they'll pay him effectively for the entire year, and that'll go against the cap. And then late in the game, in the second quarter, actually, they brought in Amane Oruwariye to play safety. Now, Oruwariye is a cornerback, but he's played safety more than corner this preseason because that's where the Ravens' need is. They need to have a backup corner, so they put him in.
Do you think he could be a practice squad guy, or do you think there just isn't room?
Yeah, so he makes a lot of sense for the practice squad because he's a guy you can call up as an activation on any given week because he can help you on special teams. So if you're a special teams player short for some reason, he's a good guy for that. And he can also help you by being a backup corner. So having those 2 elements of value, it makes him a useful guy. He also could be a backup safety for that matter, I think, from what we've seen so far.
We didn't see him play slot corner, but do you think he could handle that role?
I think he's too big. I think he's a boundary corner or probably a strong safety are the 2 positions that I think he could fill.
All right.
Okay. We can move on to outside linebacker here, talk a little bit.
Yep.
Mike Green was in there to start the game, and he started with Zion Young. And the reason I have kind of Green ahead of Young on the list here is that Green got taken out of the game early while Young played into the middle of the third quarter. So they took fewer chances with Green getting him out of there at halftime. and they had Zion Young play an extra drive into the third quarter. A lot of rotational play at these positions, so it's basically just by when they came in and then when they left. But Isaac and Burke came in on the second drive, and they played together, and then they played in all kinds of different combinations with Rucker and Young and Green for various times in the remainder of the game. But both those guys, both Isaac and Burke, were playing still on the very last drive of the game. So that
Hmm.
gives you an idea of the amount of, how Minter was putting a value on rotation all the way through the game, as opposed to just A gets all the snaps, B gets all the snaps, C gets all the snaps, etc. So
Right.
um,
And so, how many offensive linemen are we going to keep?
these are outside linebackers, but
Yes.
offensive line nine or 10 potentially.
Well, okay, I'm sorry. Outside linebacker specifically, how many of those are we going to keep?
Probably five. So you have the Hendrickson and Robinson were
So,
not active.
yeah, so we think those are a lock.
Mm-hmm.
Green and Young are probably
Locks.
higher up in the depth chart, so they're locks. So you've got Isaac, Burke, and Rucker. Burke had a really good game.
Burke had a really
Uh,
good game.
um, like, do you think all three are still vying for that slot, or do you think anyone's secured it yet?
I don't think anyone's secured it yet. I think Burke it may be in the lead now, and I'm surprised I'm saying this because Isaac had a couple of great weeks at practice since he came back from his injury, and he really been
Mm-hmm.
looking like he's going to make the team. He also, I think, is the guy who is the most likely to be able to convert his opportunities as a Sam linebacker. Like he can drop the coverage and probably give the Ravens a little more with the athleticism he has.
Mm-hmm.
Burke, they used to drop a lot to coverage. He's an ungainly, large, kind of ponderous guy, but he's somewhat slippery, and he uses leverage well, and I think that's certainly helped him. He plays a little bit too high on the line, I think, and he can get pushed out of the way on some run plays, so that's unfortunate. But he obviously had a great day rushing the passer, had two balls he knocked away, great diagnosis skills on that screen pass. Got pressure, dropped a cover, punched out the fumble at the end of the game not at the end of the game in the fourth quarter though that got the Ravens the football back with the Minnesota driving. So a lot of really nice plays from Burke. Burke has 4 years of sand in the hourglass, or the way Voss and I are terming it now, he has 3.5 years because he has an RFA year in his fourth year. Whereas Isaac is signed a 4-year contract as a drafted player and has only 2 years remaining. So that difference in the amount of sand left in the hourglass will probably play into the decision on whether Isaac or Burke is the guy they want to keep.
Mm-hmm.
So that is certainly a pretty substantial advantage for Burke, I would think.
Okay.
And
Gonna move
Rutgers
on
been,
to
yeah.
go ahead.
I just want to say one thing about Rucker. He's been on the Ravens practice squad for a while now, and I think that he'll probably last there if they want to put him back there, and if not, then they'll take their chances and lose him. Before we move on to inside linebacker, we'll take a break, and we'll be right back.
2 hours ago, Kyle arrived at the bar.
Hey, what's everyone drinking?
30 minutes ago, Kyle got his friends another round of drinks.
Cheers!
5 minutes ago, Kyle decided to drive home drunk. A minute ago, a law enforcement officer pulled up behind Kyle.
Sir, have you been drinking tonight?
A chain of events that began 2 hours ago is about to change Kyle's whole world. Drive sober or get pulled over. Paid for by NHTSA.
All right, we're back. So I guess we should move on to inside linebacker now, talk about some of the problems there. We did hit on some of this before, but Higgins was back from the concussion he suffered during the Eagles game, and DeLuca started the game with him. They ended up playing most of this football game. They played 60 snaps for Higgins and 51 for DeLuca. So that was most of the snaps. They did put in Jamon Johnson for a little bit of time, and he got hurt. Did actually see a few snaps on 3 different drives, but he got hurt and had to be replaced. And the replacement was Higgins returning to the game. And then Williford, as I mentioned earlier, we think he got hurt on the opening kickoff. So we should maybe talk about the roster and what it looks like this year.
Yeah, the depth chart. So we had Roquan Smith, Trenton Simpson, Teddy Buchanan, Carl Jones, who didn't play. And I guess my question is, how many ILBs do you think we're going to keep on the team?
Okay,
4?
so four ILBs would be right. And Carl Jones he didn't play because he was injured. He did not play because he's a veteran. So
Okay.
he might be around on the practice squad. That's where the Ravens have typically kept players like Jones. He's carries a special value on the practice squad because he's a special teams big, which means he can play the offensive line on the punt team. And that has extra value. A guy with mobility who can also play either of the two slots next to the long snapper, that has more value in terms of being a good player there. So he could end up there, and he might be called up at any time. But I think he's a practice squad or nothing at this point, and the injury certainly is not helping him. But Higgins is for sure the fourth inside linebacker, and I don't really see the Ravens as having room for more. So it may be that DeLuca is a practice squad guy. He had an up and down game, I would say, this week, but it may be that he's next up on that list.
Does he have any special teams?
Same thing as an inside linebacker. He has the size to play on the offensive line of the punt team. Mm-hmm. So that has value in and of itself. So yes, he'd be used in that role too. If Carl Jones for some reason got signed by New England or some other, team that would really value his special teams play, then I think it would be DeLuca on the practice squad would be the next guy. And it might be DeLuca even ahead of Jones because Jones's injury certainly, like I said, is not helping him.
Right. All right. Want to move on to defensive line?
We talk about the defensive line, and this is one of the areas of intense competition. So we talked about the cornerback room and what's going on. The defensive line it could be even worse. And because this is a little longer topic, I think we'll save this for the second part of this show. Maureen, I want to thank you for coming on and talking about this. I know we did this at the last second, but appreciate you so much, babe, in terms of what you contribute to the show. And I wish I had time to tell everybody all the things she did, but she very much, she's taken over the producer role for the show now. You want to talk about what that's entailed for the last month?
Not really. It's just putting the show out there.
Okay. All right. Anyway, she's learned to do all the things from scratch on how to produce an episode. And it's incredibly useful to me. I still have a lot of trouble doing it personally, and going through these steps. And oh boy, by the way, worst position to be in, the most uncomfortable position I've been in recently is being at the keyboard with her looking over my shoulder as I try and learn how to produce an episode. She knows it and she's fast and she goes, don't do this. And then, she wants to switch places with me. It's very much like when I'm trying to teach her how to play a computer game. It's that same level of discomfort is felt. So
both of us are kind of control freaks. So
yeah, there you go. I appreciate you, babe. Okay. Do you want to tell people what's your any social media handle you have, or what's
I'm not really on social media.
You got to talk about Film Study Mailbag.
Yeah. So if you have questions for the show, send your email to filmstudymailbag@gmail.com and we'll get your question. And you've been answering them on Friday Morning GM. We actually, I think, have a couple for this show, don't we?
Yep. Doing the second half.
Yep. And if you have a show idea, that's also the place to get your idea across.
I will tell you that mailbox is being watched like a hawk, and she'll come in even when I'm completely busy with something with questions and want to put them right in front of me. So we do get to those, and we won't lose your question if it goes there. You can still use hashtag Film Study Mailbag on Twitter, but I'd appreciate it if you use the new email instead. Anyway, Maureen, thanks a lot for joining me, and we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.